Thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is a community forum for the Berwick Downtown Vehicle, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Study. This is a project that's being funded through CACS, the MPO for the Kittery area. And I think if we could just go to the first slide and take a look. We were hired to take a look at the downtown area for the different the vehicles, the pedestrians, the bicycles, and just in overall recommendations. For one of the first things we did when we met with our initial committee meeting was to kind of set up study goals and objectives. The first one that the committee felt was important for the area was just improve vehicular traffic circulation. I think probably more pointed, that's the kind of the downtown signalized intersections near the bridge. It can be kind of confusing. You've got the one-way pairs going in. We just need an improvement of what those of the circulation for the area. The next one was to increase the bikeability and walkability of the area. I think there's just kind of a perceived lack of facilities, both for the pedestrians, the sidewalks, the crosswalks, getting around town, and I think just for bicycling, there really isn't much of facilities at all. The third one was kind of a perceived speed issue in the downtown. You know, vehicles moving faster than what you'd want to see in an urban environment. And the last one is pulling away a little bit, is just develop a more unified downtown between Somersworth, New Hampshire, and Berwick. This is more just to have a larger economic base of the two cities and combine, and to appreciate what each side of the river has to offer. And now that I said all that, I've realized I haven't really introduced ourselves. I didn't have a slide to give me a cue. My name is Jason Reddy. I'm a traffic engineer with Milone and McBroom. We're out of the Portland office. With me is Regina Leonard. She's a landscape architect with the firm. And we were hired through CACS and Berwick. I don't know if anything you want to add or.
Nope.
Okay, just sorry I didn't introduce ourselves. CACS is the Kittery Area Comprehensive Transportation Survey System, and that is it's a federally designated area based off from an urbanized area and population, and
No. You want me to say?
He is CACS.
We have CACS in the audience here tonight. If you want to,
Yeah, go
please.
ahead. Go introduce CACS.
All the more reason we can see where this transportation study is coming from.
All right, I'll try to be quick, but CACS, as Jason said, is the Kittery Area Comprehensive Transportation System. It's a federally designated transportation body that receives federal funding because it's in an urban area of 50,000 people or greater. CACS is part of the Portsmouth and Dover, and I believe Rochester urban areas, and it includes Kittery, York, South Berwick, and Elliott. We are sponsoring this project along with Maine DOT from Milone and McBroom to kind of look at this. So that's pretty much what CACS is in a nutshell.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And if you still don't understand, don't worry. Not everyone. It's rare that everyone does. To move along with the presentation, though, this is the study area that we're hired to look at. You can see it's kind of enclosed in the blue shape there. It roughly encloses Wilson Street, School Street, down to Sawmill Hill, up Sullivan Street, but also including Eleanor's Way, Rochester, and a little bit of Bow. Not that we won't look at other things around the area, but our specific recommendations for the study area will be this area. I know that there's recreational areas and other points of interest. I mean, we've already talked about wanting to have greater cooperation with Somersworth. So I mean, we're going to be considering those things. But as for the recommendations that will be coming out of this study, it will be really just for that which is in the blue area there. So as part of our work, the initial assessment, the existing conditions is where we are right now, and we're kind of finishing up that portion of the study. The first part of the existing conditions that we're going to be looking at is the vehicular traffic. Go ahead. What we did was a previous traffic study was done just a few years ago, so we were using their existing traffic volume counts, and that's the left throughs and the rights for each part of the for each of the intersections. You can see that right now what's displayed on the presentation is kind of the peak hours. So in the AM, the highest number of vehicles through the area, and the same for the PM. It's giving you those peak movements. So if we go to the next slide, to kind of visualize that a little bit better, this is kind of generally what those heaviest movements are. So in the AM, you can see that there's traffic coming down School Street, coming down Sullivan, and kind of heading to New Hampshire. Whereas in the PM, that reverse of the commute, you can see that the heavier movements are coming across the bridge, up School Street, and then away up toward toward the northwest there. So as part of those traffic volumes, what I did was I put it into a transportation traffic model. So that's the software that helps model and determine what the delays what the measured delay would be for those volumes at the specific types of intersections. The print is real small, but the output of the results is kind of color coded there, where you've got the blacks and the blues and the greens, which is showing low levels of delay. It's or rather high levels of service. Things are running pretty well, whereas at the other end of the spectrum is the yellows and the reds. And what should be pretty clear is that there's no yellows or reds in here. So what the traffic volumes are kind of showing us is that there doesn't appear to be a measured, and well, even part of the observations coming down and walking through the study area, there didn't seem to be a heavy volume, heavy congestion delay for the area. Things seem to be running pretty well from what we've seen. The next part of the existing conditions assessment that we did is the crashes for the area. What we found was that there was only a few locations that showed high numbers of crashes, and beyond that, just that there's kind of a pattern of crashes that may have opportunities for different improvements to correct that crash pattern. So if we go to the next, we've brought it down to 3 different intersections. Now the first one is the intersection of School, Wilson, and Allen. This is a Maine DOT designated high crash location. Maine DOT designates an intersection or even a section of road, not at an intersection, as a high crash location if it has more than 8 crashes in 3 years, but also just statistically compared to all other similar intersections, it has more crashes than they do. And the intersection of School, Wilson, and Allen qualifies for that. If you kind of look through the police reports over what was occurring there, we see that there's a distinct pattern of people running the red light at this signalized intersection. There's a few other ones, the rear end collisions, driver inattention. Well, yeah, I guess you see driver inattention all the time nowadays with cell phones and everything, but the other one is the rear end collisions. It's typical at intersections, especially signalized ones, but the running the red lights is probably a little bit more atypical, and there's plenty of them. So that's something that we'll be taking a look at for improvements that can be done to help hopefully reduce that occurrence, that pattern. The next intersection of concern was at Sawmill Hill and School. This one wasn't designated as a high crash locations. It didn't have the the threshold number of minimum amount of crashes, but there was a certain number of it had the same types of crashes all the way through it, which is failure to stop at the stop sign. That's kind of an odd intersection anyway. It almost looks as if Sawmill Hill is the through street, but it goes up against it's not the through movement. But also notably at this intersection, if you go back on a 10-year history, which I like to do just because the bicycle and pedestrian crashes are a little bit more rare, so it's harder to get patterns out of them, you can see that there was both a bicycle and a pedestrian crash at this intersection. In talking with the committee, it's just a troublesome place. There's already kind of trepidation over crossing there. It's just long and it's confusing for drivers. You pull up to it and you think you have to stop and make a right-hand turn. So that was just another intersection of concern for crashes. The last one at the bottom there is the intersection of Wilson Street, Sullivan Street, and Jordan Street. This one had a number of crashes, but the patterns themselves are a bit more mixed. I mean, 2 of them were weather conditions, so I mean, not as much you can do if the road is slick, except maybe get the sand and salt out sooner. But that's not always something that can be tracked or made a pattern out of. And the others are more just typical of the area. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Regina, and we're going to kind of make this a bit more of an interactive presentation, and we'll do some of the survey here.
Great. Thanks everybody for coming. We tonight, just because we wanted to involve people that are watching at home or people that aren't able to be here tonight that might want to participate, we're including an integrated survey. And there's different ways that you can participate. Obviously, everyone here tonight has a survey, and the way that this is going to work is that Jason will present the assessment category. So we're looking at different things like traffic and pedestrians and crossings. We'll break that up into sections, and then each section will have a few survey questions. And this is really just a way for us to kind of gauge how well we're reading the community in terms of what we're seeing for data, and it's also an opportunity for you to tell us if you're seeing something different. And it also is an opportunity for you to let us know what your concerns are. And so each section Jason will present, and then we'll follow with a few survey questions, and then some of the sections will have discussion items. So if you're not able to be here tonight, there are other ways to participate. Most notably, if you'd like to participate online, this survey is digital as well. And if you go to SurveyMonkey and you type in R and /Berwick, that will lead you to the survey. And you can take it right now. It's live, and we're going to be tabulating results through the end of December. The other way that you can participate is you can pick up a hard copy of the survey at the planning office. And the other thing that we will try to do as well is to have a PDF copy available digitally, so that if you would like a copy that has the link information on it and you'd rather take a digital survey, you can do that as well. So those are the different ways to participate. So essentially, this is what, if you take the digital survey online, the company's called SurveyMonkey, and this is what you would look like. You'd be taken to this digital page, and it'll walk you through the survey questions. So what I'm going to do is your survey that you have in the audience, I'm going to kind of walk you through the questions, and you can fill this out as we're going. And then, if you have any notes or any thoughts that we're not addressing in our presentation, we have at the end an ability to have a discussion. So please make a note of that. Anything you want us to think about. The last question of the survey is additional comments and thoughts. There's a whole page dedicated to that, so feel free to write as much as you need to on that page. So with regard to traffic and what we just presented, we would like to get a little bit of feedback from how you perceive traffic within the project area. And so the first question really has to do with, how do you think about traffic congestion in downtown Berwick, and that's the project area. Do you think it's a major problem? Do you think it's a minor problem? Do you think it's not a problem, or do you just have no opinion on it? And you'll see that a lot of the questions are structured very similar to this. The second question has to do with vehicle speeding, and whether you think it's a major problem, a minor problem, not a problem, or you have no opinion about it. And the third question, overall, do you think changes in traffic patterns are needed in the downtown area? And this is probably the one that you might have the most feelings about. And again, feel free to leave your comments, and we'll have discussion period after the presentation. But do you think traffic changes are strongly needed? Do you think they're needed, but you don't feel strongly about it? Do you think they're not needed? Or do you have no opinion on it? So those are the 3 questions for this section. And the discussion items that we have are really have to do with your experiences with the major intersections in town. If there are things that you would like to share, we understand the survey is fairly basic and it just gets the crux of what your thinking is, but if you have specific things you would like to share about any or all of these intersections, would you like to see them improved? Are there specific problems that we should be aware of that we might not be aware of currently? Just open it up for discussion. Does anybody have anything to comment about any of the specific intersections within the study area?
Well, I think the Sullivan, Wilson, Jordan one's fine. You get through it pretty easily. School Wilson and Allen, I guess I'll follow my own suggestion. So, hi, I'm James. I work in the planning department. So Sullivan, Wilson, Jordan, I think is fine. You really don't wait that long. It works well, or okay at least. School Wilson, Allen, I mean, people are running red lights. It's pretty dangerous. I think there's things that we can address there. Sawmill Hill and School Street is just a really awkward intersection. And also, the Sullivan, Eleanor is also really awkward as well. And obviously, I think most of us agree, I mean, trying to get in from Somersworth into Berwick, there's an extended delay.
Sullivan and Wilson might be a problem with all those housing units put in the future there, or, something with prime.
Right. Yeah.
Could become a problem.
Right, I do think once you clear up the bottlenecks here, eventually that intersection will probably end up in a bottleneck. Yeah.
Yes.
So I've lived here almost 50 years. And all right, I've been here for a long time, and I've never had an accident in downtown Berwick that I can remember. But I've had a lot of close ones, and almost all of them have been at School Street and Wilson Street, and it's mostly people coming down School Street, and I'm so aware of it now that within the last 3 months I had to stop very shortly because somebody went 35 miles an hour right through the intersection into the bridge.
Yep.
And it's not the first time. So I do think you've picked out all the intersections correctly that are an issue. The bridge is not an issue in Berwick unless you're coming into Berwick, which is where people are coming to at 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And that's a major issue in Somersworth, but they're all coming to Berwick.
Yeah.
So, in a summary, that's what I have tucked away in my brain.
That's perfect. Thank
All
you
right.
so much. Anybody else?
No, go ahead. My name is Ralph Murray. I live on Jordan Street. I think you have to expand the scope of your study. One thing is Rochester Street, which funnels traffic into Berwick, and also people want to get to Rochester Street from Somersworth. The light at the end of the bridge can back traffic up at Somersworth for a mile or more sometimes. There's a little tiny weird island at Sawmill and School Street that people don't know what to do with, except drive over it. School Wilson Allen has Cumberland Farms, which has 2 entrances. There's like 2 more streets coming in. I don't think there's anything that can be done there. It's already got a signal. And they've redone, the past few years, they've expanded the building and redone the parking lot, and visibility is a little better. Let's see, Jordan Street is one way at Sullivan and Wilson to stop people from crossing from 236 going to Rochester and going through that neighborhood. I live there. I have to go around the block to get to my house. It'd be nice to have a 2-way, but I don't see how that can be. Again, that's the Rochester Street traffic, so I'd like to see some more work on Rochester Street. and the traffic light in Cumberland's.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Tom Wright. One of the things is just off the map there, off the site, is going to be the new fire station. And what's going to happen now, what's going to happen with that now is we're looking at bringing the emergency apparatus out onto Sullivan Street, up above the Wilton and Jordan intersection. And now they're going to be coming and taking a left and then taking another left up at the school, Wilson and Allen Street. So those are all things that we're going to have to be looking at also.
That's great. Great. Anybody else?
Hello, I'm Marty Tebow. I just want to talk as a parent and someone that used to live downtown and walk with my children a lot, and with my neighbor as well, and we actually walked tonight. I used to live off Sawmill Hill, so my kids have always done the rec camp, so I would encourage them to walk or ride their bike, but there was no way that they could do that without me crossing that specific intersection with them. It's treacherous for children, it's treacherous on a bike, it's treacherous walking. We actually were walking one morning and someone got rear-ended stopping for us in the crosswalk. We were in the crosswalk. So I just want to reiterate that that one I think is, out of all of them, I think needs the most attention. There's lots of kids that live up in that neighborhood, and if they could just cross right there, they could access so much of the downtown, but they can't. I would tell my kids if I wasn't with them, they would have to go up to the fire station and cross at the fire station.
Yeah.
So I just want to reiterate that that is the area that I see the most for the downtown.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
I'll just hold it. The next part of the existing conditions part of the study that we've been working on is parking. Again, we just looked at a previous transportation study that was done for the town and confirmed what they had. And that's going through all the different on-street parking, off-street parking, the handicap, the hours that are there. And we really just confirmed for the future parts of our study what was existing there. So we'd made several trips to Berwick to kind of get a sense of how the area is working, and some of the observations that we made was the parking safety from the slides here. The on-street parking clearances at crosswalks, intersections, and driveways. One thing that we noticed was that, especially at like the crosswalks, and an example is right out here in front of the town hall, is that the parking is directly on the crosswalk themselves. So people are having to really get out into the streets before they can be noticed by vehicles, and to make sure there's that stop compliance before they can get out. One thing that I think is probably just generally recommended is not to have that parking there. It's a little bit different because, I mean, this is a one-way through here, so you'd only kind of need it on the upstream side. But I think generally what you want to see is 25 feet away. But part of the consequences of getting that compliance is losing some of those on-street parking spaces around them. Another thing we notice is that there's angled parking closer to the signalized intersections. We'll be looking. I mean, what is your feedback on that angled parking? Do you like it? Would you like to see something different there, or how well do you feel that works for you and the businesses as well? Other things to talk about was just the 2-hour time parking limits is kind of used a lot in the area. I know that seems to try to discourage the employees from using that on-street parking. So we looking for your feedback on how well you think that's working, or if some changes should be made there. And not specifically, but just an overall, what is the ADA compliance? There's a number of marked spots. Some of them may not work well. They might have kind of steep slopes, or not the type of access from the street up onto the sidewalk that you'd want to see. So I guess I'll hand it back over to Regina, and we'll just kind of walk through what we're looking for on the survey. Thanks.
Feel free to focus that if you need to. My eyes aren't the best, so I might have messed up. So the parking, we have really four general questions for you. And the first one is really, how would you rate your on-street parking supply? So think about when you come to town, you need to park on the street. What's your general take with regard to capacity? So do you think that on-street parking currently is more than adequate? Would you say it's adequate, not adequate, or do you just have no opinion on it? Secondly, when you visit the downtown, how frequently do you park on street? So do you park on street all the time? Do you park on street about 3/4 of the time, half the time, less, 25% of the time, or less than 25% of the time? This helps us understand sort of the use of on-street parking and how important it is to you as a community. And then Jason sort of mentioned this question is, what's your general feeling about diagonal parking in the study area? Do you strongly support the diagonal parking? Do you support it? Do you have no opinion about it, or do you not support it? So we're just looking for feedback so we can gauge.
What do you mean by angled parking?
So the diagonal parking that's in town. So it's on street, but it's at a diagonal to the curb. Yeah. So yeah. And then the final question is, do you think there's enough public off-street parking? So do you think it's adequate, more than adequate, not adequate, or no opinion? So we're looking for guidance on that. I'm going to hand it back over to Jason.
That's a quick one. All right, thanks. Yeah, so getting a bit more into the pedestrian side of the existing conditions, we did an assessment of the sidewalks for the area. We went and we had them all mapped using the GIS, and just based off from the conditions of the sidewalk, we have this this rating. So on the very small legend, you can see that green is excellent, blue is good, the yellow is fair, it's okay, and then there's the red that's poor. What you should see from, what you should be able to gather is that kind of as you move further away from the bridge, the real downtown part, the kind of the worse that the sidewalks get. In fact, even if you look at Wilson Street, I mean, we were kind of calling that a sidewalk, but it's not really. It's just kind of a extension of the road. If you go up nearer to the Allen and School Street, I mean, there is a little bit of at-grade curbing there to kind of simulate like there's a sidewalk there, but I mean, it's just essentially non-existent. But we rated it just as a kind of a poor. Anyway, the other part. So also as part of the mapping here, you can see that we've mapped kind of two other things. Now the kind of the dotted lines there is really what we would call maybe a gap in the sidewalks, a place where maybe it'd be natural to have one where the density is there, so a sidewalk could be there, and it's in a continuation of maybe where there's also existing sidewalk. For example, at the lower part of School Street, there's some existing sidewalk there. It's broken up a lot by the driveways, but then it's not there anymore for the rest of it. The other part of the assessment that we did was the crossings. You can see that there's a number of places where there's crossings, but there may be some kind of issues with it. I think I talked about it previously. There's kind of poor visibility at some of the crossings, as far as what you would want to see for drivers to safely see someone and yield to them so that they can make their crossing. Or the other one is in the yellow. There's you see where there are long crossings where it takes a while for you to make it all the way across. The Sawmill Hill at School Street is kind of the prime example, and we've heard it several times tonight, is that it's a very long crossing, and more so at that intersection. Just it's kind of an awkward place where drivers are maybe not always quite sure of what they should be doing there anyway. So we'll switch back.
So the questions in regard to the sidewalks and the crosswalks, and we'll have some discussion items that follow as well. But the first question is, overall, how would you rate the quality of sidewalks in the downtown? So thinking about, the quality of the sidewalks, are they excellent? Are they good for, fair or poor, or do you have no opinion on that? Second question is, overall, how would you rate the connectivity of sidewalks? So how would you rate the network of sidewalks? How easy is it to get from point A to point B? We mentioned the gaps in the sidewalks. So would you rate the connectivity of the sidewalks from your experience in the downtown on a scale from excellent down to poor, or if you have no opinion, mark no opinion? And we focused on several points that we noted there was a lack of connectivity, and we'd be interested in seeing, out of those areas that we noted, where you agree with us in terms of where would you like to see sidewalks added or plugged in to the gaps. So circle, in this one, just circle all that apply. And if there's any that we didn't note that are important to you, go ahead and write those down. So we're going to have a couple of different discussion items, and they're sort of related. But the first discussion item is really think about those major crossings. And we talked a little about that, and we've actually heard some comments about some of these intersections, like the Sawmill Hill and School Street intersections. We've talked about the crossing distances. When you combine that with the traffic patterns and some of the crash history, certainly we would guess that in some of these major intersections, you have distinct opinions about them or experiences with them. And we would be interested in sort of how you those intersections you would like to see improved, how you think they should be improved. So if anyone has any comments, please, feel free to come up to the mic and share with us.
Hi, I'm Kelly Gray. I actually live on Sawmill Hill, so I've had plenty of dangerous experiences with the intersection at the bottom of Sawmill Hill and School Street. I also have an 11-and-a-half-year-old and 9-year-old boys who have a lot of friends that live around. And God, I just hold my breath every time they go to one of their friends' house until I know that they've made it there safe, because there really is very few safe places to cross any of those intersections, really. I would love to see much more clearly marked crosswalks. I mean, even ours are just faded and difficult to see. I'd also love to see how some of the other towns, like Somersworth and South Berwick, have pedestrian crossing signs.
The solar ones.
Yep.
And they work well.
Yeah.
Works well up there.
Yep. Even the ones that are in the middle of the road, that just sort of fold out, really simple solution. I would love to see some more things like that just make people a little bit more aware. And then the other thing would be some of those sort of non-existent crosswalks that are considered crosswalks. I know it's not on the map, but Sawmill Hill has one too. It's just an extension of the road. So,
Yep.
More defined sidewalks, clearly marked crossings. Yeah, would be great.
Great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, Frank Underwood, 21 Key Road. Like traffic signals have warrants that have to be met. Are there any warrants that have to be met or conditions that have to be met that justify or require sidewalks to be on one side of the road or both sides of the road, and or also pertaining to crosswalks, spacings between crosswalks? I mean, jaywalking is all over the place in Portsmouth because people just want to cut there when the light changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't know if there are any warrants that, such as you have with traffic signals, that need to be met.
Yeah. I think we will be looking at that. Jason, do you have anything to add at this point?
I mean, I can, just briefly, I can speak to it. There isn't any warrants. I mean, that's, but I think there are some guidelines. Some of the ones that I've seen is that it really has to do with the kind of the density of the buildings and the houses in the area. I think when you start getting into, you know, quarter-acre size lots or even 1 acre lots, I think it's not recommended, but it would be okay to have, you know, sidewalks on both sides of the road. And as you start kind of getting your density down from there, the recommendation would be to have, well, at least on one side of the road, having a sidewalk. They're there, and that'll be part of our consideration for recommendations.
Paul Bovier. So I spend a lot of time walking around downtown. I'm down here every day, and I can still run at my age to get across the intersections, but it's dangerous. And as you get closer and closer to the bridge to Somersworth, it gets more dangerous. And I think that's where we really have to figure out how to get people to maneuver, you know, from Sullivan Street to Bow Street to the bridge, Sawmill Hill. And I think we need to concentrate in that area with pedestrian and bicycle access, because it's all going to end up there anyway. Yeah. Thank you.
Advance to the next one. So I don't know if, you know, we're kind of looking at some of these other intersections. So we've talked about the major intersections, but when we're thinking about what we would call minor intersections, so that might include a minor intersection of minor streets or secondary streets, or mid-block crossings. So if there's anything that you'd like to share or discuss or let us know about as we kind of move forward with our planning, please let us know. We've identified a number of intersections kind of adjacent to Rochester and Sullivan Street in those areas. And I will point out that I think it's Eleanor Street where there was a pedestrian incident. Is that correct?
Pedestrian, I think might have been bicycle.
Yeah.
Maybe it was pedestrian.
Yeah, so visibility is definitely an issue at that location because of the on-street parking in that location.
Why do you call them minor?
Well, it's just for, we've separated, so the major intersections are where you have, you know, multi-lanes and high volumes of traffic. These, what we would call minor intersections, are sort of the secondary roads or those secondary intersections.
I call those major.
Well, they're majorly important, and we can agree on that.
I try to cross them.
Do you want to talk about that? Do you want to give us any guidance? Okay.
I think mostly touched upon. So, I mean, just leaving here and trying to cross that crosswalk when it's 5 o'clock, you got people, I mean, going to the speed thing, you have people coming up Sullivan going probably 35, and you kind of have to peek your head out. And then Eleanor is just really wide, and the roads kind of go like this. So people are already turning.
Is it a law that when you see someone step or stop walk, you're supposed to stop?
Yeah.
That's a law.
I think it's yield.
So you yield to the pedestrian.
And you,
That's state law.
yes.
So that's not enforced, I guess.
Right, and you can't, so if you're sitting in that crosswalk right here, leaving here, and if there's a car parked, you can't, coming across from the bridge up Sullivan, you can't see the pedestrian waiting unless the pedestrian's in the crosswalk.
Yeah, and
Even then, you have to be like this to get around the car.
And that's something, you know, you asked about warrants, and that's definitely something that we will be looking at. There are guidelines for clearance zones, for visibility of pedestrians. There's a number of ways to resolve that and get pedestrians out and visible to cars so that they can have not only, you know, shorter crossings, but better visibility in crossings. So that's something that we're going to be looking at.
I don't see it on the map. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but I've seen a number of times. There's no way to cross the road from in front of Spence and Matthews, the insurance company here,
Yeah.
to cross that intersection to get to the brewery if people were walking downtown. And seen, some dangerous.
Yeah, so now that you have new, and this will,
Yeah.
this will be something too that's in flux probably, because as you have more development in your downtown, that's going to shift some of the patterns of pedestrian flow. So, looking at with that development and that new destination, people want to get there.
Yeah.
And so we'll definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, because the only way to do that now is to go down and legally cross in front of the town hall and then cross, make your way all around. So people are definitely skipping right across.
I've also noticed, I've been doing some downtown work on a building there, and when you are there at certain times of the day, it is much worse than other times. Obviously, early in the morning when everyone's rushing across to go into New Hampshire, and especially starting at 3 o'clock to like 5:30 in the afternoon. And that's when I think the danger is for pedestrians there, because everyone's in a rush to get home or go to work.
Yep.
And there's a way to slow the traffic, keep it going, but slow it across the bridge and keep it slow until it disperses further in. That would, I think, help a lot.
What about closing down between that brewery space and the town hall?
That's been spoken about a lot. That's a
Kind of
major
eliminate that
change.
road altogether somehow and tie it in with more green space. Maybe a little bit more parking,
Yeah, and just for everyone at home, the question was, why not shut down that section of the roadway that runs between the town hall parking lot
the brew pub
and the brew pub?
building.
Rochester Street.
Yeah, so I guess it's something that's been discussed before, and certainly something that we could evaluate as part of our work. Great, so we can advance.
The next part of our evaluation was on the bicycle facilities for the area. What we had was, we had Jim Tassi, who works with the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. We had him work with us to do this evaluation. Now, he made certain metrics of the area, which is the measurements. But overall, the purpose was to how does it feel to ride the area, and which is that level of service. We've seen in kind of the previous slides. Is it an A, really good, or is it not so good? Now, Jim is a well-experienced driver. Rider on his bicycle, but his perspective would be what you would call a typical driver. I keep saying driver, typical rider of the bicycle. So he's not the the full spandex and going straight with the road bike, but he's also, it's a level higher than someone that would maybe choose not to even go out at all. So with his evaluation, you can see. Again, with the color coding of the area, you've got kind of the blues, and then we're starting to see some of those yellows and oranges where the riding is really just not as comfortable. There's a lot of factors in this. You can see that some of them, it's kind of hard to see in the upper chart up there, but based off from the number of vehicles, how fast the vehicles are going, what the width of the roadway is, the parked cars on the side of the road, and based off from that was able to give a measurement of what that feels like from there. And when you look at the overall, for the whole study area that we've defined, it came out as a D. So, which may not be that surprising because there's really no bicycle facilities at all. You don't have the bike lanes or anything to really designate what a bicycle would want to see out there for improved riding, more comfortable riding. And switch.
So in terms of the bicycle facilities, the questions that we have for you is specifically, what kind of cyclist are you? Would you consider yourself the more experienced? That would be, are you a commuter? Are you really comfortable riding in all conditions of roadway, urban, or, even off-road? Are you an average rider? So that would be somebody that's comfortable on a bike, but maybe you want to ride in a shoulder or a bike lane. Sometimes, in a more urban setting, you feel uncomfortable. A beginner rider would be probably a lot of the children and the kids, or somebody that just doesn't ride a bike a whole lot. And usually a beginner cycler is not comfortable with a lot of street riding. They'd prefer to be on a shared use path. Or maybe you're just not, maybe you're not a rider. So that just helps gauge sort of the level of interest that the community might have in terms of bicycling facilities. And related to that, if you do bike in the area or have, how comfortable are you bicycling in the area? If you're an average rider, how comfortable would you be bicycling in the area? Would you feel, knowing the conditions? So, you know, that rates from very uncomfortable to comfortable. And then again, if you're a non-rider, just let us know. I don't really ride my bike. And would you consider biking in the area? So imagine better facilities. If there were bike lanes, if there were bike racks, if there maybe were alternate routes with less traffic, you know, traffic that patterns that are more predictable, would those conditions kind of spur you to ride your bike within the downtown more? And finally, we're sort of at that place where if there are additional comments or things we didn't touch upon that you think we should be looking at or considering, or something that you just want to share with us, now's the time, and we sort of welcome anything that you want to add.
I just curious what your thoughts are with the master plan of the road going through the middle of the two other additional intersections that creates. Do you think the road going through the middle is a good idea? Things like that, yeah.
That's probably the traffic engineer question. I think from a landscape architecture question, I'll have to let you know, but there's probably some pros and cons to doing it.
I just wanted to briefly say, and we didn't really kind of go over it in the beginning, but I mean, that's what, you know, kind of the impetus of what this study is coming from, is that there is some proposed development coming from the former tannery site. I mean, we just kind of want to distinguish. I mean, there's certain recommendations that are going to come out anyway, whether that, you know, how fast that development comes, but we will also, as you said, kind of take into consideration what that impact will be. I mean, we won't be making recommendations for the site. That's going to be with the town and the developer, but we can have certain input over maybe what would make it work a little bit better. But we welcome everyone's comments over everything that you've seen tonight.
Going back to bicycles, I think there should be consideration of bicyclists for people who don't ride because they drive. And the worst place to ride is this intersection at the bridge with 2 lanes of traffic, at least in 3 directions. So if a cyclist wants to make a left turn, he's got to be in the left lane of traffic with traffic on his right. And maybe somebody in that lane doesn't know how to let the cyclist go. So if there's some, I don't know how to solve that. It's always a problem in a city, making those left turns in high traffic.
I've brought this up before at other meetings, and that's, can we do away with the signal in downtown, and can we minimize the number of corridors passing through, meaning focus on just Route 9 coming through that area with localized traffic in the other area. We had 2 summers exposed to that with the construction of the bridge, where the signals did not work, traffic was rerouted around, it worked. People don't mind going slower, they hate being stopped. And I think if you were coming down that mile from Somersworth down the hill, if you were continually moving, people would enjoy that better than sitting there. So I'd like to really focus on what we can do to clean up that bridge area, as Paul had mentioned.
Can I make a subjective comment? So I grew up in the second largest town in Maine, close to Auburn, and I rode my bike from the time I was 7 or 8, between Lewiston and Auburn, through sidewalks, parked cars, and everything else. And I lived, and I think Berwick has a lot of potential to be a good, safe bike riding area for adults, kids, anybody, if we just kind of think about it and slow the traffic down. Yeah. Thanks.
So the final piece of sort of the assessment and for you to give us some guidance, and one of the tasks that was put before us is to really sort of think about the character and the feeling of the downtown area. And one of the things is to the question about the unification or the cohesiveness between the Somersworth downtown connecting over to the Berwick downtown. So we'd just like to get some thoughts on what you'd like to see for your downtown in terms of the character or the feeling of it. I know it's sort of a touchy-feely, that's what I'm good at. So if anyone has anything to share or any guidance for us, we'd definitely welcome it.
Hi there, Ed Lavasser, City Councilor in Somersworth. Thank you for having me here today. I'm glad to see that one of the objectives is to work on a unified downtown. I think that as we're looking at expanding the biking facilities here in Berwick, that will help to create a connectivity from the biking lanes that exist along the High Street corridor. Another thing, expanding the walkability, I think that's another piece that will help to create a connective and unified downtown. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think we can unify those downtowns by we have shared decorative lighting that are actually pretty expensive, but we can find a maybe a Walmart brand that looks very nice or similar. No, but seriously, have the decorative lighting that carries over from Somersworth to the bridge to Berwick. We've talked about trying to unify, maybe having complimentary signage to have benches. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about next steps, or you want me to? So, yeah, I guess I'll just finish up since we've changed places so many times. So the next steps, we invite you, again, we're going to keep the survey online till the end of the month. If you have any questions at all or you want to provide additional feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to James, or you can even reach out to myself or Jason. Our contact information is embedded in this presentation, which will be available at the planning office site digitally, hopefully, right? You'll post it? Yeah. So the next step for us really is we're going to start to take all of this information that we get, and we're going to start to analyze opportunities and to look at how, for example, traffic, pedestrian crossings, how that all responds to different ways of looking at the routing of traffic, or looking at changes that some of what we've talked about tonight. What does it look like if we could reduce crossings and make a more pedestrian scale environment? So those are the things that we're going to be doing next. We're going to be coming back and meeting with you. The meeting that you see, the red arrow, the first meeting, that's tonight's meeting. So we shared sort of the assessment, and we came to you to get some feedback and information. And then we'll take that and we'll start to look at some conceptual design or future scenarios. And we're going to work through those. And then when we're going to work with the committee, and when we come up with sort of an optimal strategy, we will come back to you and we'll get feedback. And I will say that at that time, we'll most likely share the whole process with you, because, that's gonna get, you'll want to know, what have we looked at, what have we evaluated. We'll walk you through all of that, and we'll show you what we think and what the committee thinks is the optimal strategy. We'll get your feedback, and that'll be before we sort of finalize and move the plan ahead. So that's the next step in the schedule. I think the timeline for our next meeting with you is, if I'm reading that right, the end of April, so it'll be late April. It may shift a week or two, one way or the other. I know April vacation is kind of in that area. So, but is there anything else anybody would like to share with Jason or I before we wrap up?
I have one thing. Hi, I'm Dave Andreessen. I just, you would probably know better than I do about traffic, the traffic signals, the timing of them. And I think we can all talk about the one right outside on School Street, right by Cumbies. That something happened to the timing of those lights, and I think that that's why people are starting to blow through, especially when it's yellow. They know that the light, they're only going to have like 20 seconds maybe, so they just gun it and go through the red lights. Something happened with the timing with that light. And the other thing too, I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and there's like 3 or 4 cars, and then the light turns red again. So I can understand why they would want to speed up. But the other thing too is there's not a very big delay between the light turning red and then the light turning green the other direction. So I think that if there was a longer period that the lights were just red. And the other thing is the bridge over here. I like what Frank said about I hate that signal there. I mean, I remember when we didn't have it there, we had different flows. But in the interim, I think that a quick fix would be the timing of those lights, that Berwick Bridge and traffic that's going to go over the Berwick Bridge from School Street gets a longer green light, and the traffic coming down Rochester gets a shorter green light. I mean, I'm talking like at least a minute, and that's going to clear all that traffic up, because I sit through it every day and I watch it, and it's all 3 intersections are timed the same way, but Rochester Street doesn't have nearly as much traffic coming down. So those were my only suggestions, kind of things I noticed, I guess. So.
Traffic cameras.
Jason could probably speak to that. There's a lot of science that he could speak to. He can go deep.
Well, I mean, there's kind of when you have a traffic camera detection. Here, I'll just step up for a second. When you see the cameras at traffic signal, those aren't like monitoring you or watching you. There's not going to be someone on the other side. Really, it's just a video-based way of having the computer see that there is someone waiting where there it is, and then as you would, and that's what extends the light and hopefully works well when it's working. As we're seeing, it's not really working out here, but that has kind of some advantages, because when usually what you see is the loops on the road, which are cheaper, but in our freeze-thaw cycle of Maine, they kind of get torn up and then they just stop working. Whereas when you have a video camera in the air, if they stop working, well, you pop out a new one and put another one in. So there's advantages and disadvantages. I mean, like a disadvantage of the video was that if it's foggy out, it has a lot harder timing seeing a vehicle there. So whereas a big disadvantage for the loops is that a bicycle doesn't get picked up by them a lot. So it's there's different ways of detecting vehicles.
Great. So I think that's all we have. Can you put it forward just one more time? So Jason Reddy is a project manager, and he's also our traffic engineer, transportation planner, and he's leading the project. I'm supporting. I'm the senior landscape architect with Milona McBroom in Portland. So our contact information is in the materials. And as well, can you, Jason, go back to the survey link? Just if anybody needs the survey link that's listening, we'll put that back up for you. It's at the bottom of the page. And we'll just leave that up for a minute. But again, thanks everybody for coming tonight. And if you have anything else you'd like to share, just let us know. So, thank you.